Hello and welcome back to another episode of From Prison to the Streets. I'm Eric. I did 11 years in prison, and I talk about prison stuff. Today we're talking about rats. What happens to rats, confidential informants, snitches, etc. in prison? And how do they operate? What are they about? Why do they do what they do? We're going to talk about all that stuff. Be sure to like and subscribe. Let's get into the video. I'm pretty sure we understand what I'm talking about when I'm talking about rats. Whether you call it a rat, a confidential informant, a snitch, whatever, we're talking about people who tell on other folks. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be a criminal activity. Maybe it's just something that you don't want a staff member, security, whatever, to know. Maybe it's against the rules, whatever. Anytime you have someone talking about business that isn't theirs to another person in authority and situations like that, that's telling. Why do people tell? It's not really who I am, so I can't really talk about this from experience, but what I've seen is a lot of times people will tell on a fall partner because they want to get a reduced sentence. Let's say a couple of people do a crime together and the prosecutor says, hey, if you testify against your buddy, we will cut some time off your sentence. We will drop all these charges if you plead to this one, or something like that. Or we'll try to push for you to get X amount of months. So that's one reason why they tell. Sometimes it's to get out of trouble altogether, although usually that's not what happens. Sometimes they'll just tell out of jealousy. When I was in El Dorado, I was in the JCs, I was teaching guitar classes, I was teaching interpersonal communications class, financial management class, and I was in the band room all the time. I had a dog, I had a good job, and there was people that were hating on me because of that. And the same thing was true with my cellmate. He was the president of the JCs. He moved around a lot. He did a lot of cool stuff, and people saw that, and they didn't like it. They wanted that, and because of that, they told on him. Basically, they would try to say, oh, this person's doing this, this, and this, when in fact he wasn't doing those things, but they couldn't find any real dirt on him. Now, that's another aspect of telling. It doesn't always have to be true. People can just make shit up about you and put it out there. Something that folks don't realize at times is you don't have to be a nobody or have zero clout to be a rat. I've known guys who had a lot of influence, who were high-ranking gang members who turned out to be rats. And sometimes they'll do that on purpose to move attention away from themselves. Let's say they have something going on such and such day. They're bringing some contraband into the facility, and they don't want the officers looking here. They'll tell on someone so the officers are looking over here and they can get their lick in. In prison, sometimes you'll run into these guys that they call warden's pets. And basically, those guys, they're telling just to get special favor. Sometimes if a guy gets favor from an officer, maybe they'll get some special privileges. Maybe they'll get something in their cell that they wouldn't normally be allowed to have. Maybe a hobbycraft item or an extra fan or something like that. Or maybe they just want a degree of immunity. We had Freedom in the JCs, who was a master splinter rat. And by that, I mean he was a giant rat who walked around on two legs. He would tell with whatever was going on out of the food stand, because he ran the food stand at the time. So he would go into the gym and yard office and tell the activities officer all sorts of stuff, what was going on. I guess activities specialist would be the correct term. But, he would go in there and tell, and if someone had problems with Freedom, the activities specialist would just bump them off the call out to work the food stand or shut them down on whatever they were trying to do. And that's how they'll operate. Sometimes they just go to someone's office and hang out and make it look like they're talking, be it their boss's office or a unit team's office or something like that. Maybe they're just talking to the police on the run. But sometimes they will also slip a kite to an officer, and a kite, I just mean a handwritten note. They'll slip that to the officer who's working the floor or doing rounds or something like that. Or maybe they'll slip it into the mailbox because all the mail goes to the mail room and it gets sorted through before it leaves the facility. So that will be found. In Kansas, we have something called a request to staff member. If you want to get anything done, if you want something added or someone added to your phone list, for example, or you're trying to get a visitor approved or something like that, or maybe you're trying to get a job, it doesn't really matter. Anything you're trying to get done, you put it on a Form 9 and you put it at the officer's desk. But what a lot of guys will do is they'll tell on people in Form 9s and they'll slip it in the mailbox, or they'll give it to the officer, or they'll slip it under the unit team's door. Now, when I was in the Kansas system, they also had something called pound 50. You could go to the phone, you could pick it up, you could dial pound 50, and that was their violent offense hotline. And they also had one for PREA, the Prison Rape Elimination Act. You could call and report sexual harassment, or if someone was getting ready to booger you or something like that. So you would have guys going out to the phone, picking up the phone, dialing pound 50, and folks thought that they were just talking to their people if they didn't see them dial the phone, but in reality, they were telling on someone. In addition to all that, in a prison environment, you have something called dry snitching. And dry snitching is basically where you're talking about someone's business real loud in front of the police, in front of a staff member. So you're thinking a security officer or maybe a unit team or something like that. They overhear you talking and then they write you up. That's how it works in prison. Of course, you also have people testifying in court or filling out a witness statement or something like that. So what happens to someone when they rat, when they tell? Word's going to get out. Usually, if someone testified on their case or if they put in a statement on their case, there's going to be some paperwork that recorded that interaction. You know what I mean? There's going to be a witness statement from either an officer who talked to the person or from that person, or maybe they testified in court, and in that case, there's actually a court record of it. You can get all someone's paperwork from the law library. And even if you can't get paperwork, if you're on a case with someone, chances are, if you told on them, they're going to let it be known. And that will get around the compound when you land, or it can spread throughout the state. It can travel to multiple compounds throughout the state. And then, you're known as a rat wherever you go. The best case scenario for someone who is a rat, people just won't mess with them. They say, believe nothing you hear and only half of what you see. And a lot of times if there's not paperwork, maybe people won't act on it if they hear that someone's a rat. But if someone's got a bad reputation, nobody's going to be doing business with them. No one's going to want to sit with them at chow. No one's going to go out to the day room and play cards with them and chop it up unless the person who's chopping it up with them has also got some shady stuff either with their case or in their past. Worst case scenario, the person who told is going to get taken off the yard. They're either going to get beat up, hit over the head with a pipe, stabbed, or maybe worse, killed. It's worth mentioning that the stakes are much higher if somebody is gang affiliated, because at that point, it's not just on the person who told. If someone's affiliated and they're telling, that looks bad on the whole group. So that group is going to make it their business to take that person off the yard. And they're going to do so in a very violent and extreme manner because they're going to make a point. And if that person has any gang-related tattoos on them or anything like that, that ink is probably going to be taken off of them. Either burn off, cut off. You can use your imagination. I've seen guys who are known rats get hurt in some pretty bad ways. There was a dude who got boiling oil thrown on him, got thrown right in his face. His skin was blistering and melting off. There's another guy in county, a dude grabbed him by the back of the head and went to smash his head on the table. He didn't really hit the table flush. He almost missed, but he caught the very edge of the table right about here, and it basically just scalped the dude. It took like a big flap of skin and it just laid it over, and kind of looked like a bad toupee, you know, because his whole wig was just peeled over. So for rats in prison or in jail or whatever, it can get real quick. Anyway, that's all for today's video. I want to say thank you to my Patreon patrons, Kenneth Iman and Brian Kitchens. Thank you for your support. If you would like to support the channel, you could go check out my Patreon page. There's a link in the description. Or I have merch. There's links down in the description for that. Or I have a link to my PayPal. There's a link to that in the description as well. And I also have my mailing address, so if you guys want to send me some fan mail, say, hey, what's up, whatever, that's there too. Anyway, I'm Eric. This has been another episode of From Prison to the Streets. I will see you all later. Break these chains.